Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're stepping back, way back actually, to look at some ancient texts that offer a really extraordinary way of seeing the universe. We're diving into an esoteric system of cosmology and numerology that's rooted in the Book of Enoch.
That's right. And for this deep dive, our source material includes a briefing doc, a timeline, characters and events, and an FAQ. It's all focused on what they're calling Enoch's angelic cosmology and sacred numerology.
Right. And our mission here, basically to unpack this pretty dense, complex framework. We want to get a handle on its core ideas, the deep meaning it gives to certain numbers and celestial beings.
Yeah, and what it suggests about the divine order of the universe, and maybe the most fascinating part, where humanity fits into that whole grand design.
Exactly.
This system, well, the way our sources present it, it offers what's called a pre-Mosaic perspective. So think of it as a worldview that might have existed alongside, maybe even before, some of the biblical frameworks we're more familiar with. It looks at the cosmos, angels, history, all through this unique lens. And it suggests hidden meanings encoded not just in stories, but in numbers, in geometry.
Like a code.
Precisely, like a blueprint for spiritual growth. And crucially, a way to fight back against these negative, corrupting influences it describes.
Yeah, imagine uncovering an ancient blueprint for reality itself, one encoded in math and shapes in ways we don't usually think about. So we're going to guide you through the key parts of this source material, help you get a quick grasp of the really fascinating details and what makes this system tick. Okay, let's dive in.
Okay, so laying the foundation. Let's start with the Book of Enoch itself. Now, it originally came from ancient Aramaic and Hebrew traditions, but the version that's best preserved today is actually in Ge'ez.
Ge'ez, that's an ancient Ethiopian language, right?
Exactly. And that preservation history itself kind of hints at how important it was in certain traditions, even if it wasn't included in, say, the canonical scriptures of others.
And at its core, our sources say this system reveals a pre-Mosaic angelic cosmology. So a universe structured around angels and their order, and it's all encoded through an esoteric numerological system.
Yeah, like the universe has this hidden operating system, and it's written in numbers.
Wow.
And what's really interesting is how this framework isn't presented as being totally separate. The sources tell us it deliberately pulls in concepts you see in other esoteric paths.
Like what?
Well, threads from Kabbalistic Sephiroth, the 10 divine emanations mapping existence in Kabbalah. Also, Hermetic principles, that idea of as above, so below, correspondence between realms. Even astrothergic planetary gates linking planets to ritual magic.
Okay, so it's connecting dots.
And it clearly influenced later systems, too, like John Dee's Enochian magic back in the 16th century.
So it's drawing on all these different streams of thought about how the unseen world works. But what's its main purpose? What's it trying to do?
Well, primarily it seems to be twofold. First, it's trying to map the soul's potential path upwards, through these celestial hierarchies, understanding the layers of spiritual reality.
Okay, a path for ascent.
Right. And second, it's positioned as a direct countermeasure, a way to combat the distortions and corruptions that, according to the text, were introduced by these fallen angels, the Watchers. It's all about restoring alignment with the true divine rhythm, the celestial harmony.
And this wasn't just some obscure idea.
Apparently not. The sources point to its significant influence, especially in Second Temple Judaism, some early Christian mystical circles, and like I said, later traditions like Kabbalah and Dee's system. It clearly left a mark on how some people viewed the divine and the cosmos.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. The numbers. The source material claims that sacred numbers aren't just for, counting sheep.
Not at all.
In this system, they're seen as like archetypal principles. They're the fundamental keys to cosmic order, spiritual change, transformation.
Yeah, think of them almost like the building blocks, or maybe the fundamental frequencies that structure reality in this specific worldview. They embody aspects of creation, reveal the divine structure.
So let's walk through the key numbers the sources highlight. Let's unpack what this system says they mean, their hidden significance. First up.
7. 7. The source describes it as representing completion, celestial harmony. It's seen governing the 7 heavens, the 7 main archangels, the 7 classical planetary spheres.
The usual suspects for 7.
Pretty much. The text calls it the seal of creation and notes it mirrors that idea of spiritual ascent you find in Hermeticism. It's presented as the universe's kind of baseline rhythm.
Okay. Next, 10.
10 signifies divine order. Think the structure of the Sephirotic tree from Kabbalah.
Right, the 10 Sephirot.
Exactly. So in this system, 10 encodes those Sephirot, but also the 10 prophetic weeks that structure history and principles of divine law or judgment. The source actually calls 10 the compression of infinite into finite.
Taking the boundless and making it manifest.
Precisely. Bringing divine potential into reality. It even suggests things like the 10 horns on apocalyptic beasts are like a corrupted reflection of this divine number.
Interesting. Okay, 12.
12 is tied to zodiacal governance, divine cycles. Think 12 heavenly portals, 12 tribes, 12 apostles.
Always 12.
Right. It rules these celestial windows, as the source calls them, for souls to travel and angels to descend. It binds the zodiac directly to the angelic hierarchy. So 12 is crucial for understanding the cyclical nature of divine influence and spiritual movement.
Got it. 22.
22 is all about sacred encoding, the paths of wisdom. It's linked directly to the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet,
Which in some traditions are seen as the building blocks of creation itself.
Exactly. And also the 22 paths connecting the Sephirot on the Tree of Life. The source calls 22 the fusion of vibration and light, seeing the letters themselves as the divine language DNA, the vibrational blueprint of creation.
Wow. Okay, 33.
33 has a very specific meaning. Master initiation, angelic ascension. It reflects Enoch's symbolic age when he ascended and became the scribe Metatron. The source interprets 33 as a kind of solar Christ code, a number signifying the union of heaven and earth, a threshold of transfiguration, higher consciousness.
Powerful stuff. 70.
70 relates to the nation's generational guardianship. It governs the 70 angelic shepherds supposedly appointed over the nations.
It's like guardian angels for countries.
Sort of, yeah. And it links to the 70 members of the ancient Sanhedrin, the list of nations in Genesis 10. The source sees 70 as representing the fractured divine image post-Babel. Like divine guidance got scattered or fragmented after the Tower of Babel.
Okay. And then there's a number linked directly to the big problem in this system. 200.
Yes, 200. This marks fallen authority, the corruption of knowledge. It's the number of the Watchers, that group of angels who descended on Mount Hermon.
The ones who fell.
Right. The source actually calls this event a quantum fracture of divine mind, which sounds pretty dramatic.
It does.
It implies a fundamental break in cosmic unity. The number 200 itself is described as the base frequency of angelic deviation, representing this dual corruption they introduced. Corruption of knowledge and corruption of physical form.
Corrupting both mind and matter.
That's the idea. And finally, a number that's key to how the system thinks time should work. 364.
The calendar number.
Exactly. 364 represents solar perfection, the sacred time grid. It's the number of days in Enoch's specific solar calendar. The source really emphasizes this. It's the sacred rhythm uncorrupted by lunar drift, perfectly aligned with angelic time, divine order. It's even linked geometrically to something called the Enochian cube, a meditative tool for syncing up with this rhythm.
Wow. Okay, so these numbers, they're not just random counts. They're presented as the literal operating code of this cosmos, the structure, the pathways. They're like the language you need to understand reality within this whole framework.
Precisely. They provide the numerical keys, not just for the structure, but for understanding the processes too, alignment, deviation, everything within the system.
So within this numerically coded universe, there's this angelic matrix you mentioned, a hierarchy of beings, the players in the drama.
Exactly. And at the top, maintaining order, you have the archangelic core. They're described as the governors of those 7 heavens we talked about. The source gives them specific roles, associations.
Right, like Michael, the warrior of divine justice, associated with fire, sun, or Mars.
Correct. Then Gabriel, messenger of divine will water, the moon. Raphael, the healer and guide air, Mercury.
And Uriel, guardian of sacred knowledge, Earth, Saturn, or maybe Uranus.
That's how the source lays it out. Then Raguel, the arbiter of divine harmony linked to justice, Venus. Remiel, the herald of resurrection, the awakener associated with Jupiter.
And Seracle, overseer of air and spirits, the Punisher. Linked to Pluto, maybe.
That's the picture painted. These are presented as the primary forces working to maintain that divine order and guide existence.
But as we saw with the number 200, this system identifies a huge disruptive force, the Watchers.
Right. The source pinpoints this specific group of 200 angels, the Watchers, who fell from their station. Led by figures like Semyaza, the source calls him the root breach, like the origin point of the problem.
The first crack?
Yeah. And Azazel, termed the divergence vector, suggesting how that initial break spread corruption. Others are named too, Arachiel, Kokabiel, and so on.
And what exactly did these watchers do, according to the text?
They descended specifically onto Mount Hermon, and they started teaching humanity these forbidden teachings.
Forbidden knowledge. What kind of things?
The source lists them: making weapons, enchantments and magic, astrology, harmful uses of herbs and root cutting, and interestingly, the use of cosmetics.
Cosmetics. Why is that forbidden?
Well, the source's interpretation is pretty deep. They see the whole event as that quantum fracture of the divine mind. It wasn't just disobedience, it was a fundamental break in the unified divine understanding. It was knowledge taken out of divine order, fragmenting the original divine mind, leading to chaos that needs a final judgment. And cosmetics, specifically, are singled out as introducing clophothic glamour.
Clophothic glamour. What's that?
Think of it as a kind of superficial, distorting illusion, something that masks or alters the divine image, the Selim Elohim, that inherent divine spark or likeness within humanity. It's seen as covering up the true nature.
So it's like a cosmic infection corrupting the divine blueprint for both creation and humanity itself.
That's exactly the narrative, a very dramatic one. The source also briefly mentions the 70 shepherds, those angelic overseers of nations whose guardianship got fractured or complicated after Babel.
Man, this is a huge cosmic drama. You've got divine order, these powerful archangels, and then these fallen beings bringing chaos with knowledge deemed forbidden because it messes everything up. What really stands out to you in this whole angelic setup?
For me, it's that clear distinction between order and disruption, and the idea that this isn't just, spiritual warfare in the abstract. It affects the very fabric of knowledge, even physical appearance, according to this view.
Right. Okay, so let's look at how this system sees that corruption affecting the actual stage, time, and space. There's a big focus on the sacred calendar.
Yes, definitely. The cornerstone is that 364-day solar year. The source is very precise: 52 weeks, 4 seasons, exactly 91 days each, giving you 52 Sabbaths. Nice and neat.
And the sources are adamant about why this calendar is so important. Right? It's supposed to be perfectly aligned with angelic harmonics, maintaining divine order, and critically, it's uncorrupted by lunar drift.
They draw a sharp contrast. Lunar calendars, the source says, are used by fallen priesthoods. They're seen as introducing error, distorting feast timings, messing up covenantal alignments, basically pulling things out of sync with the true divine rhythm.
So the timing is crucial.
Very. And the cardinal points of the year, equinoxes, solstices, are framed as portals for angelic invocation within this solar system. Key moments to connect with that divine order.
Okay, so that's time.
Yeah.
What about space? How does the Enochian system structure the cosmos?
It's presented as this layered hierarchy. You've got the 7 heavens, not just places, but layers of initiation or consciousness, each ruled by an archangel. And Earth itself has a specific geometry: 4 corners for the winds or cardinal directions, and 12 directions overall.
And these physical directions connect up to the heavens through the 12 portals of light.
Exactly. Described as celestial windows for soul traversal and angelic descent. 3 portals per cardinal direction, making 12. They bind the earthly realm and the zodiac to the angelic hierarchy, and importantly, they're supposedly opened by ritual invocation.
So geometry isn't just static shapes here, it's functional. It creates pathways.
Right. And this system also packs meaning into specific symbols and places using numerical encoding, gematria.
Gematria, where letters have number values.
Yes. So Mount Hermon, where the Watchers landed, it gets a gematria value of 304. This is interpreted as ban of light, sacred defilement. It's even called an inverted mirror of Sinai, the place where divine law was given, now inverted as the gate for the fall.
Wow. Heavy symbolism. What about Azazel, the divergence vector?
Azazel gets 98, interpreted as counterfeit light, clophothic distortion. He's linked to the scapegoat ritual in Leviticus and seen as a primary vector for divine distortion, a channel for corrupted energy.
And there's symbolic geometry, too, describing spiritual states.
The tree of Enoch is described as a vertical cube spiral, a kind of spiritual DNA ladder connecting heaven and earth. The source says this structure was corrupted by the Watchers, specifically a dath rupture, referring to a break on the Kabbalistic tree of life model, but it can be restored.
Okay. And the Enochian cube, you mentioned that with the calendar.
Right. That's described as the 13 by 28 matrix. It encodes the 364-day year. The source presents it as this multidimensional framework for aligning with angelic time, a key meditative focus for achieving solar perfection, syncing up with that divine rhythm.
And the 12 portals are simply encoded 3 by 4, 12, reinforcing their structure.
Exactly. And all this geometry and symbolism isn't just static. It ties into how the system sees history itself, structured through prophetic geometry. The 10 weeks of prophecy map history from Adam to the final judgment, and these are numerically tied to those 70 shepherds guarding the nations.
So, okay, we have this intricate cosmic structure, the angels, the watcher problem, the corruption. What does this system say someone should do about all this?
Well, that's where the ritual alchemy comes in, as the source calls
Right.
it.
It's not just about knowing, it's about doing,
Yeah.
aligning yourself.
Exactly. The goal is active alignment with that sacred solar calendar and the angelic hierarchy to counteract the Watcher's distortions.
And how do you do that? What are the practices?
The source mentions specific things. Invoking the angelic governors at those cardinal gates timing rituals to equinoxes and solstices. Meditating on the 364-day cycle. Visualizing the Enochian cube. These are concrete ways to sync up with that sacred solar time code.
And chanting the archangel names.
Yeah, that's presented as a way to attune yourself to the frequencies of the seven heavens, connecting with those divine orders.
But there are also warnings, right? Things to avoid.
Oh, definitely. Specific deviation warnings and countermeasures. You have to actively reject lunar calendars. They distort divine timing, linked to fallen priesthoods illusions. And reject cosmetics, seen as altering the divine image, that Clufothic glamour.
So the countermeasures are about purification, cleansing yourself through these solar-aligned rituals and consciously saying no to the influences and practices tied to the Watchers.
And the system even boils it down to what the source calls a concluding formula for gnosis. Gnosis meaning, direct spiritual knowledge or insight.
Okay, let's hear the formula, straight from the source.
It's presented as gnosis equals, brackets, alignment with 364 times purification of 7 times ascension through 10, close brackets, divided by influence of 200.
Right. So how does that translate into practice?
The source explains it. It implies a daily commitment, meditating on the 364 cycle for alignment, invoking the 7 archangels for purification, ascending through the 10 Sephirot via pathworking, meditating on the Tree of Life paths for ascension, and actively rejecting the distortions of the 200 Watchers, minimizing their influence.
In the ultimate goal of all this.
To restore the Edenic state, basically, to bring yourself back into harmony with the angelic hierarchy, that divine solar time code, the uncorrupted blueprint of creation. It's presented as a pathway back to the perceived original divine order.
So pulling it all together, this system is offering a really comprehensive framework. It's trying to explain creation, identify what went wrong, these specific sources of corruption, and then give a detailed spiritual path encoded in numbers, time, geometry for someone to navigate back to harmony.
That sums it up well. It's a whole package deal for understanding and acting within this particular cosmic view.
We definitely took a deep dive today into a really intricate layered ancient system. The whole idea that numbers aren't just numbers, but keys to cosmic understanding, or that time itself has a correct divine rhythm. That's pretty powerful stuff.
It is. And how it weaves this into such a dramatic story. Celestial beings, forbidden knowledge, a path to restore a fragmented order. It's compelling. It really shows how deeply cosmology, numerology, and spiritual practice were seen as interconnected in these traditions.
Offering a complete explanation for why the world is the way it is, and here's what you can do about it.
Exactly. A diagnosis and a prescription, all in one framework.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? About how different cultures, different times have tried to map the universe and figure out our place in it, using the tools they had. In this case, sacred numbers, angels, cosmic cycles, all seen as core elements of reality in the Book of Enoch tradition.
It's a fascinating example of a worldview where everything, from the smallest number to the grandest angel, has its place and function in this cosmic drama and in the individual's own journey.
So here's a thought to leave you with. If this ancient wisdom saw numbers, shapes, and rhythms as actual blueprints for reality, as paths to insight, how do you perceive the underlying order, or maybe disorder, in the world around you today? Is there maybe a hidden language right there in plain sight?
Something to definitely ponder as you look at the patterns or lack thereof in your own life and the wider universe.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Enochian cosmology and sacred numbers. We hope it gave you a unique perspective on a really fascinating piece of ancient esoteric thought.